Picked up your phone to check one notification. That was 40 minutes ago. You don't remember deciding to keep scrolling. You don't implode choosing to watch 11 videos about a conflict on the other side of the world. Then a video about a celebrity you don't even like. Then 3 posts about an economic crisis you can't do anything about. Then a meme. Then back to the conflict again. Nobody told you to do this. There was no moment where you consciously thought, I am now going to spend the next 40 minutes feeding myself a stream of content that makes me feel slightly worse with every swipe. Yet here you are, thumb moving on autopilot, stomach tight, eyes burning, and some quiet, exhausted part of your brain whispering just one more, just one more, just one more. If that scenario feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to know something important before we go any further. This is not a personal failure. This is not a sign that you have weak willpower, or that you're broken, or that you simply need to try harder to put the phone down. What is happening to you when you doom scroll is one of the most precisely engineered psychological phenomena ever built into a piece of technology. And understanding exactly how it works is going to change the way you see your phone forever. So, stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand your own brain better than most psychologists did 20 years ago. And you're going to understand exactly why an app designed by some of the smartest engineers and behavioral scientists on the planet is quite literally built to make stopping feel almost impossible. Let's start with the term itself, because doom scrolling is a surprisingly recent addition to our vocabulary. But the behavior it describes has been building for over a decade. Doom scrolling refers to the compulsive consumption of negative news and content, typically through endless scrolling on social media or news apps, well past the point where it's informative or useful, and often well past the point where it stops feeling good at all. The term exploded into common usage around 2020 for fairly obvious reasons. But here's the thing that should genuinely unsettle you. The architecture that makes doom scrolling possible wasn't built in 2020. It was built years earlier, by teams of engineers who studied behavioral psychology, specifically to understand how to make an app maximally addictive. Doom scrolling isn't an accident that happened to a neutral piece of technology. It's the predictable output of a system that was optimized deliberately and with extraordinary precision to capture and hold your attention for as long as humanly possible. To understand how this works, we need to go back about 70 years to a psychologist named B.F. Skinner and an experiment involving pigeons that would, decades later, become the secret blueprint for the most addictive technology humans have ever created. Skinner was studying what's called operant conditioning, essentially the science of how rewards and punishments shape behavior. He put pigeons in boxes with a lever. Press the lever, get a food pellet. Simple enough. Then Skinner did something interesting. Instead of giving the pigeons a pellet every single time they press the lever, which is called a fixed reward schedule, he started giving them pellets randomly. Sometimes the pigeon would press the lever and get rewarded immediately. Sometimes it would press 5 times with nothing happening. Sometimes 10. The reward arrived on what's called a variable ratio schedule, meaning the pigeon could never predict exactly when the next reward was coming. Here's what Skinner discovered, and this is the single most important psychological fact you need to understand to make sense of your own scrolling behavior. Pigeons, on a variable reward schedule, press the lever far more obsessively, far more compulsively, and far more persistently than pigeons who got a reward every single time. When the reward is predictable, the brain doesn't need to keep checking. But when the reward is unpredictable, when there's a chance, just a chance, this next press might be the one that pays off, behavior becomes almost impossible to stop. This is, not coincidentally, exactly how slot machines work. You don't win every time you pull the lever. You don't even win most of the time. But the unpredictability of the payout is precisely what makes slot machines one of the most addictive forms of gambling ever invented. More addictive, in fact, than games where the odds are clearly stated and consistent. Casinos figured this out generations ago, and somewhere along the way, the people designing your favorite apps figured it out too. Now think about your phone, Every time you pull down on your screen to refresh your feed, what's actually happening, from a pure mechanics standpoint, is identical to pulling the lever on a slot machine. Sometimes you refresh, and there's nothing interesting. Sometimes, there's a mildly amusing meme. And every so often, completely unpredictably, there's something that hits you hard, a piece of shocking news, a deeply emotional video, a post that makes you laugh out loud, a comment section that pulls you into a heated argument you didn't know you needed to read. You cannot predict which refresh is going to deliver the big hit, and that unpredictability is not a bug. It is, quite literally, the entire design philosophy. The pull to refresh gesture itself, the one you've performed thousands of times without ever thinking about it, was deliberately modeled on slot machine mechanics by the engineers who designed it. This isn't speculation or conspiracy thinking. Former tech executives, including people who held senior design and ethics roles at major Silicon Valley companies, have publicly described, in considerable detail, how slot machine psychology was intentionally built into the core interaction design of the apps that now occupy hours of your day. The slot machine comparison, as powerful as it is, only explains part of what's happening to you. To understand why doom scrolling specifically, as opposed to just regular scrolling, feels so uniquely difficult to escape, we need to talk about a slightly different and even more fascinating piece of brain chemistry, dopamine, and something neuroscientists call the prediction error. Most people think of dopamine as the brain's pleasure chemical, the thing that gets released when something good happens and makes you feel happy. That's not quite right. The actual truth is far more relevant to what's happening when you doom scroll. Dopamine isn't primarily about pleasure. It's primarily about anticipation, about wanting, about the gap between what you expect and what actually happens. Neuroscientists discovered this through research on prediction error, which essentially measures the difference between an expected outcome and an actual outcome. Here is the critical finding. Dopamine spikes are actually larger when a reward is uncertain than when it's guaranteed. Your brain releases more dopamine in anticipation of a possible reward than it does upon receiving an expected one. The wanting, in other words, often produces a bigger neurochemical response than the having. This is precisely why doom scrolling can feel almost more compelling than scrolling through purely positive or neutral content. Every swipe carries genuine uncertainty about what's coming next, and that uncertainty itself triggers a small dopamine response, a tiny hit of anticipatory craving, even before you see what the next post actually contains. Your brain isn't necessarily seeking out bad news because it enjoys feeling distressed. Your brain is chasing the uncertainty itself, the not knowing, the possibility, prediction error. The content on the other side of the swipe is almost secondary to the neurochemical loop that the swiping motion itself has created. Now let's add another layer, because dopamine and variable rewards explain the mechanism, but they don't fully explain why doom specifically, why bad news in particular, exerts such a powerful pull on our attention compared to good news. For that, we need to talk about something psychologists call negativity bias, and it is one of the oldest, deepest, and most stubborn features of the human brain. Negativity bias refers to the well-documented psychological tendency for negative experiences, negative information, and negative stimuli to have a significantly greater impact on our brains than positive ones of equal intensity. Researchers have demonstrated this across dozens of studies and contexts. We remember insults longer than compliments. We notice criticism faster than praise. A single piece of bad news can outweigh, emotionally, several pieces of good news. And critically, this isn't some modern psychological glitch or a symptom of social media rotting our brains. This bias is ancient. It is, in evolutionary terms, almost certainly a survival adaptation. Think about the ancestral environment our brains evolved in. If you walked past a bush and there was a 50% chance it contained either a delicious berry or a venomous snake, Which possibility do you think your brain evolved to prioritize noticing? The cost of missing a threat, a predator, a poisonous plant, a hostile stranger, was, throughout almost the entirety of human evolutionary history, catastrophically higher than the cost of missing an opportunity for pleasure. Brains that paid disproportionate attention to potential danger survived. Brains that didn't get the chance to pass on their genes. Negativity bias isn't a flaw in your psychology. It's a feature, inherited from tens of thousands of years of ancestors for whom ignoring threats could be fatal. Problem, and this is where it becomes genuinely unsettling, is that this ancient threat detection system evolved for a world of immediate, local, actionable dangers. A rustling bush, a hostile tribe nearby, a predator's tracks. Your threat detection system was never designed to process a constant, globalized, algorithmically curated stream of every disaster, conflict, tragedy, and crisis happening anywhere on the planet, 24 hours a day, delivered directly into your hand. Your brain, doing exactly what it evolved to do, treats every alarming headline with the same urgency it would have treated a genuine, local, immediate threat thousands of years ago. It doesn't have a mechanism for distinguishing between there is a predator near my actual physical location right now and something terrible happened to a stranger 4,000 miles away that I have absolutely no ability to influence. Your nervous system reacts as though both are equally urgent, equally relevant, equally demanding of your attention and vigilance. Because for the overwhelming majority of human evolutionary history, there was no such thing as the second category. If you heard about a threat, it was almost certainly relevant and almost certainly nearby. This is why bad news feels on some deep and almost involuntary level more necessary to consume than good news. Your brain isn't being irrational when it prioritizes the distressing headline over the heartwarming one. It's running ancient survival software on a completely modern operating system that this software was never built to handle. And the people who design the platforms you use every day understand this dynamic, extraordinary precision, because understanding it and exploiting it is directly tied to a metric they care about enormously: time on app. This brings us to the part of this story that I think deserves the most attention, because it's the part most people genuinely don't understand, even when they intellectually know that social media companies want them to use their products more. The algorithms that decide what shows up in your feed are not neutral. They're not simply showing you what's popular or what's relevant to your interests in some innocent, passive sense. They are optimization systems, built and continuously refined using machine learning, with one overwhelmingly dominant objective function: maximize engagement. And here is the crucial insight that connects everything we don't, if discussed so far, back to the design of the platform itself. Engagement, from the algorithm's perspective, doesn't care whether you feel good. It doesn't care whether the content makes you happy, informed, calm, or fulfilled. It cares whether you keep scrolling, keep clicking, keep commenting, keep watching. And because of negativity bias, because of the dopamine prediction error mechanism, because of variable reward psychology, content that makes you anxious, angry, outraged, or afraid is on average simply more engaging in the cold technical sense of that word than content that makes you feel calm or content. This isn't a dark conspiracy theory. It's been documented through internal research that has, in several well-publicized cases, leaked from major technology companies themselves, showing executives and researchers fully aware that their algorithms were amplifying content that made users, including teenagers, feel worse about themselves and the world, while simultaneously keeping them on the app longer. The system isn't malfunctioning when it serves you a stream of distressing content that you can't seem to stop consuming. It is functioning exactly as designed. The algorithm isn't optimizing for your happiness. It was never built to optimize for your happiness. It is optimizing for your attention, and your attention, as it turns out, is most reliably captured not by what makes you feel good, but by what makes you feel like you cannot afford to look away. Let's sit with that for a second, 'cause I think it's neuroline. For the weight of it rather than just hearing it as an abstract fact. Every time you find yourself unable to put your phone down after seeing something upsetting, every time you tell yourself, okay, this is my last scroll, and then somehow find yourself still scrolling, 20 minutes later, you are not failing some personal test of self-discipline against a neutral piece of technology. You are going up against systems built by some of the most well-funded research and engineering teams in human history, systems explicitly designed using psychological research on addiction, on variable rewards, on dopamine, on negativity bias, with the specific and stated business goal of maximizing the amount of time you spend looking at a screen. The deck, quite literally, is stacked. And once you really understand that, I think it becomes a lot easier to extend yourself some compassion, because the fact that you struggle to stop scrolling doesn't say anything about your willpower. It says something about how extraordinarily effective this technology has become at exploiting universal features of human psychology that every single person on the planet shares. Now, understanding the mechanism is one thing, but I want to walk you through what doom scrolling actually does to your mind and body over time, because this is where the consequences stop being theoretical and start becoming something you can probably recognize in your own life. When you consume a continuous stream of distressing content, your body responds the same way it would respond to actual, immediate physical danger. Your sympathetic nervous system activates. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, gets released into your bloodstream. Your heart rate can increase. Your muscles can tense. This is your fight or flight system, doing exactly what it evolved to do in response to perceived threat. The problem is that, unlike an actual physical threat that resolves within minutes, doom scrolling can keep this stress response activated continuously for extended periods, sometimes hours, because the stream of threatening content never stops, and your nervous system never gets the signal that the danger has passed. Chronic activation of this stress response, research consistently shows, is associated with a whole cluster of negative outcomes: increased anxiety, disrupted sleep, difficulty concentrating, irritability, and over the longer term, potential impacts on cardiovascular health and immune function. There's also a specific and particularly cruel irony embedded in doom scrolling that's worth pointing out directly. Many people doom scroll late at night, often while lying in bed, often specifically because they're anxious and looking, almost instinctively, for information that might help them feel more in control or prepared. But the blue light exposure, combined with the cortisol spike from distressing content, combined with the mental stimulation of processing dozens of emotionally charged stories right before attempting to sleep, creates almost perfectly optimized conditions for poor sleep. And poor sleep, in turn, is strongly associated with increased anxiety, reduced emotional regulation, and a greater susceptibility to negative thinking patterns the next day, which, not coincidentally, makes you more vulnerable to doom scrolling again the following night. It's a closed loop, each part feeding the next, with very little built-in mechanism for breaking out. It's also a psychological phenomenon worth understanding here, called learned helplessness, and concept that comes from decades of psychological research, showing that when people are repeatedly exposed to negative situations they cannot control or influence, they can develop a generalized sense that their actions don't matter, that things are hopeless, that there's no point in even trying to change their circumstances. Doom scrolling exposes people to an almost constant stream of crises, conflicts, and catastrophes, the overwhelming majority of which they have absolutely no personal ability to influence or resolve. You cannot, by reading another headline, stop a war on the other side of the world. You cannot, by watching another distressing video, fix a problem that exists thousands of miles away. And yet your brain is processing each of these as though they were urgent, immediate, and personally relevant. Over time, this combination, urgency without agency, can contribute to feelings of powerlessness, anxiety, and a kind of low-grade chronic dread that researchers and clinicians have started referring to, somewhat informally, as headline stress disorder or news fatigue, a state in which people feel simultaneously overwhelmed by information and powerless to do anything meaningful with it. I also want to address something specific, because if you're watching this video, there's a good chance you're part of the generation that's been most affected by all of this. If you're Gen Z, you grew up with this technology already fully formed and refined around you. You didn't have to adapt to an algorithm designed to exploit negativity bias and variable rewards. You grew up inside one. Your adolescent brain, during some of its most critical developmental years, the years when emotional regulation systems and reward processing pathways are still actively forming, was shaped in an environment of infinite scroll, push notifications, and algorithmically optimized outrage. And the data reflects this. Surveys and studies looking at anxiety, depression, and reported loneliness among teenagers and young adults have shown significant increases over the past decade, a period that closely tracks the rise of smartphone ubiquity and algorithm-driven social media. Researchers are still actively debating the precise causal weight that social media specifically carries in these trends, because human psychology and mental health are influenced by many overlapping factors, but the correlation is strong enough, and the underlying mechanisms we've just discussed are well established enough that dismissing the connection entirely would be its own kind of denial. So where does that leave us? Because I don't want to end this video by simply making you feel worse about something you already feel bad about, which would, ironically, be exactly the kind of content the algorithm would love. I want to give you something genuinely useful, grounded in the same psychological principles we've just spent the last 20 minutes unpacking. The first thing to understand is that willpower alone is almost never a sustainable solution, a problem this deeply embedded in technological design. If a system is engineered by teams of behavioral scientists specifically to overcome your willpower, trying to out-willpower it through sheer determination is frankly not a fair fight. What actually works, according to behavioral psychology, is changing your environment and your defaults, rather than relying purely on conscious resistance in the moment. This means things like turning off non-essential notifications, which removes the external triggers that initiate the scrolling loop in the first place. It means using built-in screen time tools, not as a punishment, but as a friction point, because even small amounts of added friction, like an extra tap or a time limit prompt, have been shown in behavioral research to meaningfully reduce automatic, low-awareness usage. It means physically removing your phone from your immediate environment during specific windows, particularly the hour before sleep, since we already know how badly that combination of timing and content interacts with your nervous system. Second, and this one is genuinely important, if you're going to engage with news and information, and of course you should, being informed matters, try to do it with intention, rather than as a background, ambient, infinite stream. Choose a specific time, a specific source, a specific amount of time, and then deliberately stop. Sounds simple, almost too simple. It directly interrupts the variable reward mechanism, because variable reward addiction relies on unpredictability and continuous availability. The moment you impose a defined boundary, a clear start and a clear end, you're fundamentally changing the psychological structure of the behavior, moving it from an open-ended slot machine into a bounded, intentional action. Third, understand and forgive yourself for negativity bias rather than fighting it with shame. The pull toward distressing content isn't a character flaw. It's tens of thousands of years of evolutionary programming colliding with technology specifically engineered to exploit it. When you notice yourself doom scrolling, the most useful internal response isn't "what's wrong with me," but rather, there's my ancient threat detection system, doing exactly what it evolved to do in an environment it was never designed for. That small shift in self-talk, from judgment to recognition, has been shown across multiple areas of behavioral psychology to make it significantly easier to actually change a behavior, because shame tends to trigger more of the same coping mechanism that caused the problem in the chase, while self-compassion tends to create the psychological safety needed to actually try something different. And finally, it's worth remembering the single most important insight from everything we covered today, because I think it's the one that has the power to genuinely change your brove. The moment you fully internalize it, the algorithm is not your friend. It is not neutral. It is not simply reflecting the world back to you. It is a system built by extremely intelligent people, using deep and sophisticated knowledge of exactly how your brain responds to uncertainty, reward, and threat. And its singular, overriding goal is to keep your eyes on the screen for as long as possible, regardless of what that does to your nervous system, your sleep, your sense of hope, or your mental health. Once you see that clearly, once you stop interpreting your inability to put the phone down as a personal weakness and start recognizing it as the predictable result of an extraordinarily well-engineered system working exactly as intended, something shifts. You stop fighting yourself, and you start instead recognizing the actual opponent. Your brain isn't broken. It's running exactly the way millions of years of evolution built it to run, doing its absolute best to keep you safe in a world that no longer resembles the one it was built for. The bush doesn't actually contain a snake. The headline 4,000 miles away doesn't actually require your vigilance tonight. And the next swipe almost certainly isn't going to be the one that finally makes you feel better. Knowing that, really knowing it on a gut level, and not just an intellectual one, is the first and most powerful step toward finally putting the phone down and choosing deliberately where your attention goes next. Every morning, millions of people make the same promise. I'll just check my phone for 1 minute. A quick glance at the news. A couple of social media posts. Maybe one interesting article before getting ready for the day. But somehow, 1 minute becomes 10. 10 becomes 30. Before they realize it, they're emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, and carrying the weight of the entire world's problems before breakfast. If you've ever found yourself trapped in that endless cycle of scrolling through one alarming headline after another, unable to stop even though every swipe makes you feel worse, you're not lacking self-control. You're experiencing one of the most sophisticated psychological traps ever engineered. Here's the unsettling part. There's a reason your brain refuses to let you put the phone down, even when every part of you knows you should. Think about the last time you doom scrolled. You probably didn't enjoy it. In fact, you may have felt anxious, frustrated, or even hopeless, yet you kept going. Why? Why would your brain continue doing something that makes you feel terrible? The answer lies in an ancient survival system that evolved thousands of years before. Smartphones existed. Your brain wasn't designed for social media. It was designed for survival. Long before civilization, your ancestors stayed alive because they constantly searched for signs of danger. Missing a threat could mean death. Missing good news rarely carried the same consequence. As a result, evolution programmed your mind to treat negative information as urgent, important, and worthy of immediate attention. This tendency has a name: negativity bias. It simply means that your brain naturally pays more attention to bad news than good news. Imagine hearing that 100 airplanes landed safely today. Your brain barely reacts. But hear about one plane experiencing trouble, and suddenly your full attention locks onto the story. Your mind begins asking questions. Could this happen again? Could it affect me? Is there more I need to know? Your brain believes that gathering more information increases your chances of staying safe. Thousands of years ago, that instinct kept humans alive. Today, it keeps your thumb scrolling endlessly through headlines designed to trigger exactly that response. But negativity bias alone isn't enough to explain why doom scrolling becomes so addictive. To understand that, we need to look inside one of the most misunderstood chemicals in the human brain, dopamine. Most people believe dopamine is the brain's pleasure chemical. That's only part of the story. Dopamine isn't mainly about pleasure. It's about anticipation. It motivates you to keep searching because your brain expects that something important might be waiting just beyond the next swipe. Scientists call this dopamine prediction error. Imagine receiving a reward exactly when you expect it. Your brain barely reacts. When something unexpected happens, a shocking headline, a surprising post, breaking news alert, your dopamine system lights up. Not because the content necessarily makes you happy, because your brain has learned that surprises might contain valuable information. Every refresh becomes a question. Maybe the next post will explain everything. Maybe the next article will finally make sense of the chaos. Maybe the next video will contain the answer you've been looking for. That tiny possibility is enough to keep you scrolling. This is where the comparison to slot machines becomes impossible to ignore. Walk into a casino and watch someone sitting at a slot machine. They pull the lever. Most of the time, nothing happens. Occasionally, they win a small amount. Every once in a while, someone hits a jackpot. Psychologists call this a variable reward schedule. The rewards are unpredictable, and strangely enough, unpredictable rewards create stronger habits than guaranteed rewards. If every pull produced the same outcome, people would lose interest quickly. But because the next pull might be different, the brain stays engaged. Now replace the slot machine with your phone. Every swipe is another pull of the lever. Most posts are forgettable. Occasionally, you find something hilarious, fascinating, or emotionally powerful. Sometimes there's breaking news that feels incredibly important. Sometimes a friend shares something meaningful. Sometimes a video completely captures your attention. You never know what comes next. That uncertainty is exactly what keeps your brain invested. Infinite scrolling isn't simply convenient design, Justin. It's a digital version of the same psychological system that casinos have relied upon for decades. Notice something else about doom scrolling. Rarely do you stop after reading one bad headline. Instead, one story leads to another. A natural disaster leads to political conflict. Political conflict leads to economic fears. Economic fears lead to health concerns. Each topic branches into another web of uncertainty. Your brain convinces itself that understanding just one more piece of information will reduce anxiety. But something strange happens instead. The more information you consume, the more anxious you become. Why? Because uncertainty fuels anxiety, and anxiety demands more certainty. Your brain mistakenly believes that the answer to feeling overwhelmed is gathering even more information. It's a loop. Anxiety sends you searching. Searching exposes you to more negative information. More negative information creates more anxiety. The cycle repeats itself over and over. The tragedy is that your brain genuinely believes he's protecting you while quietly exhausting you. Have you ever noticed how doom scrolling usually happens late at night? That's no accident either. Decision-making becomes weaker when you're tired. Emotional regulation decreases. Self-control requires mental energy, and by evening, that energy is often depleted. Meanwhile, algorithms never get tired. They continue serving content designed to capture attention precisely when your defenses are at their weakest. Here's another fascinating detail. Your brain hates unfinished stories. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. When something feels incomplete, your mind keeps returning to it. News platforms understand this perfectly. Headlines often create questions instead of providing answers. Experts warn of major changes. Scientists discover alarming trend. You won't believe what happened next. Your brain craves closure. Clicking promises resolution. But instead of closure, you're usually presented with more uncertainty, more questions, and more reasons to keep scrolling. And let's be honest, doom scrolling doesn't always begin with bad intentions. Most people don't wake up thinking, I'd like to increase my stress today. They simply want to stay informed. They want to be responsible citizens. They don't want to miss something important. Those are perfectly reasonable goals. The problem isn't staying informed. The problem is when information quietly transforms into compulsion. There's an invisible line between learning and consuming. Learning usually ends when you've gained understanding. Consuming often continues without purpose. You stop asking, what am I trying to learn? And start asking, what's next? That single shift changes everything. The scroll becomes automatic. Minutes disappear without conscious awareness. You aren't making decisions anymore. You're following momentum. Technology companies understand these psychological principles extraordinarily well. Every notification, every refresh animation, every recommendation system has been refined through years of behavioral research. Engineers measure engagement with incredible precision. Which colors attract attention? Which headlines increase clicks? Which videos keep viewers watching longer? Every small improvement strengthens the system's ability to hold your focus. This doesn't necessarily mean that everyone working on these platforms intends harm, but it does reveal something important. The success of many digital platforms depends on one metric above all else: attention. The longer you stay, the more advertisements you see. The more advertisements you see, the more revenue the platform generates. From a business perspective, maximizing attention makes perfect sense. Now ask yourself a difficult question. If an algorithm had to choose between making you happier or making you stay longer, which outcome would better support its business model? The uncomfortable answer explains a great deal about modern digital life. Algorithms are incredibly effective at identifying the content that keeps humans engaged. Unfortunately, the content that captures attention isn't always the content that improves well-being. Fear captures attention. Outrage captures attention. Conflict captures attention. Uncertainty captures attention. Calm rarely goes viral. Peacefulness doesn't usually generate endless comments. Stability isn't often shared millions of times. Our attention naturally gravitates toward emotional intensity, and algorithms learn from that behavior with remarkable speed. This creates a feedback loop between human psychology and artificial intelligence. Your brain prefers emotionally charged information because of evolutionary survival instincts. The algorithm notices that preference and serves more emotionally charged information. Your brain interprets the increased exposure as evidence that the world is becoming even more dangerous. The cycle strengthens itself every single day. Fortunately, understanding the trap changes your relationship with it. Awareness creates distance. The next time you catch yourself endlessly scrolling, pause for just a moment. Ask yourself one simple question: am I searching for knowledge, or am I feeding uncertainty? That single question interrupts the automatic loop. It brings conscious thought back into a process that usually runs on autopilot. You can also remember something powerful about dopamine. It thrives on unpredictability. The less random your information habits become, the weaker the addictive pull becomes. Instead of checking news every few minutes, choose specific times during the day. Instead of relying on endless feeds, seek complete, reliable sources. Instead of consuming everything, consume intentionally. Most importantly, remind yourself that knowing every alarming headline doesn't give you control over every global event. Your brain often mistakes awareness for influence, but constantly witnessing problems doesn't necessarily solve them. Sometimes the healthiest decision isn't becoming less informed. It's becoming more selective about what deserves your limited attention. Imagine your attention as the most valuable currency you possess. Every moment you spend scrolling is a moment you cannot invest elsewhere. You could spend it learning a new skill, strengthening relationships, creating something meaningful, exercising, praying, reflecting, reading deeply, or simply enjoying a quiet moment without interruption. Every swipe carries an opportunity cost that rarely appears on the screen. Perhaps the greatest irony of doomscrolling is this: people search for certainty in a place designed to keep them uncertain. The next headline promises answers, yet often delivers only more questions. The next refresh promises clarity, yet frequently increases confusion. The next swipe promises completion, yet the feed never ends. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what evolution prepared it to do. It seeks threats, predicts uncertainty, and searches relentlessly for information that might increase safety. The challenge is that today's digital world has learned how to speak directly to those ancient instincts with extraordinary precision. So the next time your thumb automatically reaches for one more scroll, remember what's really happening. You're not just looking at your phone. You're interacting with millions of years of evolutionary psychology and some of the most advanced attention-optimizing technology ever created. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: the algorithm doesn't wake up every morning asking how it can make your life more peaceful, more fulfilled, or more joyful. It asks a much simpler question: how can it keep your attention for just a little bit longer? Once you understand that difference, you regain something incredibly valuable: the freedom to decide where your attention truly belongs.